Hey there, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and the part of my collection that I'm going to be talking about today is the rest of the new stuff I've bought over the past month and a half or so. Things have been pretty slow over the the self-quarantine here for the past couple of months, but as things have started to open up and mail has started chugging along again, I kind of got just a ton of new stuff in a very short matter of time, and it was just too much stuff to show you in one video. So if you watched episode 85, I showed you like half of my new stuff, so I'm just going to show you the rest of that here in episode 86. And yeah, even as I started shooting this, I got some more stuff, so I've just kind of thrown some more stuff here at the end of this video. So yeah, once I'm done here, you'll be up to date with everything I've purchased lately, although I've got another shipment in the mail right now, so I'll have more new stuff to show you soon. So yeah, I want to get into that because I've already got a lot of stuff to show you, and I don't want this video to be too long. But you might notice things look a little different right now. I got a new desk in my whole man cave here, toy cave. So this is probably going to be the angle that I'll be shooting from here on out. So this will probably be what all my videos look like. I'm still changing some stuff around, so you'll see the background change around a little bit as I experiment. But yeah, hopefully when I've finished doing all my moves, I'll do an updated video with a full tour of the toy room so you guys can see everything that's going on here. So yeah, without further ado, let's take a look at my new stuff. So here is Megatron inside of the packaging. Now the packaging looks nice as far as the colors and the design, but it's pretty basic. There's not a whole lot of original artwork or anything on there. Like you've got this big blank side here that just states that this is the 35th anniversary figure. We do have some artwork of Megatron here on the side. And on the back you see the figure in both his robot mode and his tank mode, which get a good look at it there because I am not going to transform this figure once I get him out of the box. And speaking of getting him out of the box, let's do that right now. So here is the 35th anniversary Megatron figure outside of the packaging. And I've been waiting for a figure like this for a very long time, because this is a Megatron that looks the way Megatron is supposed to look. Because I feel that these characters should look the way they looked in the cartoons or the comic books published by Marvel in the 80s. I would even take some of the revamped styles based on the current comics published by IDW. I just like to have these characters look like they do in the source material. And the vintage toys often didn't look like the source material, which is why, even though I was a big Transformers fan when I was a kid, I didn't keep most of my Transformers toys. I had a whole bunch of them, but I only held on to like my favorite 3 or 4, and I got rid of all the rest of my Transformers when I was like in my tweens or early teens. Like for example, so Megatron here, like I said, he looks like he did in the cartoon. Here you see him in the cartoon. You know, it might not be exact, partly because Megatron transformed into a handgun in the cartoon and everything. This version here transforms into a tank. Megatron has transformed into a tank before, even dating as far back as into the 80s. The second version of Megatron they put out was a tank. But I think most people associate him with his very first Generation 1 mode, which was a handgun. But nowadays, I guess it's illegal for Hasbro to make him look like a realistic handgun, so they find other ways to make him into tanks and sometimes other vehicles. So yeah, you'll see how close this figure looks to the animated version. But when I show you a picture of the original toy that was released back in the 80s, you can see how he doesn't quite match up. Like, he functionally had to transform into the gun, and the people that designed the toys back then didn't seem to care so much about the aesthetics of the robot. So he had some really awkward pieces hanging off of him, and this was the case for a lot of Transformers. So even though I loved these characters in the cartoon, I'd get the toy of them and I'd be like, this just doesn't look like the character, and they didn't move very well. They were often very stiff. So I got rid of most of my Transformers. Then when I started collecting toys again as an adult. And I'd always kind of continued to collect toys through my teens and stuff, but it had really toned down. It was a few Star Wars figures here and there, a few Gundam figures. But in the mid and really early 2000s, that's when G.I. Joe came back and Masters of the Universe came back. All these things I loved as a kid. I was really happy to collect these new and improved versions of things I grew up on. And the first modern Transformer I got was this Bumblebee here. And I thought it was a great figure. Now, it doesn't transform into a VW bug the way I feel Bumblebee is supposed to. But I never transform my Transformers into their alt modes anyway. So I felt his robot mode looked close enough to what Bumblebee should look like. He was small, he was yellow, he had kind of big rounded parts here. It kind of matched up with his cartoon counterpart. And yeah, I thought it was really cool. And these were called, I think they started out called Transformers Classics. They changed the name a couple of times. It was Transformers Generations and Reveal the Shield and various other things over the years. But it was a line that was inspired by the original G1 Transformers, cartoons, comic books, etc. So Bumblebee was my first, and I wanted Hasbro to release all the other figures, and it has taken them a very long time. Like, it was only about 2 years ago that we finally got characters like the Dinobots and some of the combiners. Like, considering that Bumblebee here came out, I think it was about 2005, and I wasn't getting some of these other characters that I really wanted, and they weren't, really underrated, unknown characters. These are like main characters, popular characters, and I wasn't getting them until 2018. It was just crazy. And with Megatron here, he is one of the most important Transformers. He is the leader of the Decepticons. And they made a few Megatrons over the years, but they never made one that I felt like was classic enough. It matched up with that classic aesthetic that I could pose next to this Bumblebee, and that I would think, yes, that's the perfect Megatron. Some of the Megatrons I had in my collection, I bought this guy because I thought he was kind of cool looking. But he's very stylized. He's based on one of the cartoons that was out at some point in the 2000s. But yeah, definitely not G1 style. And he was a little shorter than I like my Megatron to be, because I wanted Megatron to be the same size as Optimus Prime. And my Optimus Prime figures were bigger than this guy. I had this cutesy little guy. Just recently, I got the reaction figure from Super 7, which is a little 5 points of articulation figure. It doesn't transform, but I really love that figure because it really captures the look of the cartoon. So I had all these little versions of Megatron, but I really wanted a version that I could stand on my Transformer shelf. Like, I didn't want it to be a Funko Pop or a reaction figure. I wanted a Transformer that looked like the classic Megatron. And when Titans Return, which was a toy line put out by Hasbro in 2017, 2018, something like that. They put out a Megatron that transformed into a tank. Here he is. And I thought, this one is good enough. This is as good as it's going to get. He's pretty classic looking. Even though the sticker on his chest here is kind of cheap looking, that little swirl is based on the original toy design that had this little swirly design on the gun. Like, the face looks right. The shape of the helmet there and everything. Colors wise, he's pretty close. He's got the gray with some blacks and some reds. Big cannon on his arm, even though it's got some big hollow parts. And he's far from perfect, but I thought this will do. This guy I display next to my Optimus Prime. He's the right size, and I was pretty content with this guy. So then Hasbro put out the Siege line last year, and they were making some of the best versions of classic Transformers ever. And so they put out another new Optimus Prime and another new Megatron. And the Megatron looked really nice. It was definitely an improvement over this one. But considering I had just gotten this guy like the year before, I thought, you know what? This guy will do. I'm not going to upgrade my Megatron, even though I like the new one better. I can't be buying every single one that comes out. These things are expensive. But then Hasbro took the Siege Megatron, repainted it in cartoon colors, and released it under the 35th anniversary banner, and that's what we have here. So this guy here, you'll see with this paint job with these like white lines and gray lines, this is all based on his look in the 80s cartoon. And you could kind of call it cell shading. Like, have you ever seen a 3D animated show and then they run a filter over it and it makes it look like 2D animation? That's kind of what's going on here with this Megatron toy, and it looks really cool. I think it's very successful, and I'm glad I didn't get the previous Siege version and I held out for this one here. So not only does he look great, and he looks much more G1 than even this guy, he moves really well. You know, way more posable than, you know, the vintage toy. You can pose him in lots of good poses here. This big part on his back's a little big and clunky, but I can deal with it. Looks like kind of a jetpack. And yeah, overall, I just think this is a really cool figure. Definitely the best Megatron in my collection. Sure, they've made some really nice ones that look even more like the cartoon in, say, the Masterpiece line, but those guys can cost you, you know, $100 plus. So for a figure like this that costs about 30 bucks, I don't think you're going to do any better. I think this is probably going to be the last Megatron that I buy. So, very cool. So this here is the Decepticon Skywarp from the Siege War for Cybertron line inside of the packaging. So unlike the other Seekers who came in window boxes, this is more of a deluxe figure, so he comes in a box. You can't actually see the actual figure. There's no clear window on the front. Instead, it's just got this really nice original artwork of Skywarp. And you'll see there he's got two of these double-barreled guns and this little pterodactyl sidekick. And they're all on there because that's what makes this figure deluxe, is he comes with 3 of these smaller Transformers. So on the side of the package there, we see the familiar artwork that we've seen on all the Siege packaging. And on the back, you get a shot of the Skywarp figure, along with the 3 smaller figures, Pterodactyl, Fracas, and Shroot. And nothing to see on this side here. You'll see here the package is called the Phantom Strike Squadron. So let's pop this open and take a look at these figures. So here is Skywarp and his little buddies outside of the packaging. So you can see inside of that box, not only did we get Skywarp and these 2 little guys that turn into guns and little pterodactyl that turns into an axe, we also got multiple blast effects. So for example, like these things here, they can be placed on the ends of his guns to make it look like he's firing. They can also be placed on these guys when they transform into guns, and they're double barrels, so you can put both of those effects on this guy. This effect here is supposed to look like where a shot is being landed and he's being shot. I'm not quite sure how this attaches. I think it can kind of attach to him, so when you transform him into an axe, you can make it look like there's an impact coming from him. And then there's a couple more translucent little blasts. They work the same way. So I'm not sure what they're supposed to represent. Just a different type of laser beam, I suppose. So that's kind of a cool little thing to have added into the collection, is all these various blast effects. Now, before I get into talking about this figure too much, I want to get a little bit of a rant out of the way. So as I mentioned before, Skywarp here, he is a member of the Seekers, which is a team of Decepticon jets that have existed since the earliest days of Transformers back in the 80s. They took one model of jet and repainted it in multiple different colors and called them all different characters, the leader of whom was Starscream. And every time they reboot the Transformers, Starscream is always the first figure they make. So here's this same mold that they used to make Starscream. So this was the first guy they made. And then they repainted this Starscream figure multiple times. And so, yeah, I have this figure quite a few times in different colors. I'll show you those guys in a second. But this figure here, on his own, I believe he retailed for $40, and he came in the window box that I showed you earlier. So $40, it still seemed like a little much because most of the figures in the Siege line retail for $30, and he's really not much bigger than them. But I was okay with that. $40, fine. And then most recently, the most recent repaint I got of this guy was this character here. So this guy's called Hot Link. And he came with, just like Skywarp here, he came with two little buddies that turned into guns. So there you go. These two little dudes here. And these are just repaints of figures that we've already gotten before too. So now we get this one guy and two little guns. I didn't really need the little gun guys. They weren't very important to me. But because he was packaged with them, he cost $60. So, you know, I'm buying a figure that I thought was worth $40. Now I'm paying $60. And I was a little annoyed about that. And I think I vented about that in a video a month or so ago when I got this guy. Anyway, now I got Skywarp, which was the last one of the Seekers that I needed to finish the collection. And not only do they give him two little gun guys, but they give him the stupid little pterodactyl guy that turns into an axe. And so this package cost $70, which I feel is just crazy. You know, I've already got the figure a couple of times for $40. I really don't like the fact that you're forcing me to buy these little figures and just upping the value by $10 every time you add one in. They actually do sell all of these characters, not the exact same name, but they've sold these same figures in different paint colors and stuff, and they actually sell them for $10 a piece. I don't feel these guys are worth $10, but especially when you're adding them to another figure. If you want to add one of these guys and add another $2 or something, fine. But to add $10 for every one of these guys that you throw in there, I think is just ridiculous. So I am not impressed with Hasbro in that regard. But now that that's out of the way, let's talk about all these little figures. So let's start with the pterodactyl. Like, he's kind of cool. I like dinosaurs. I like his head sculpt is very nice, but the body is very plain. Like, this is how I would be displaying him. And yeah, look at how hollow and blank. It looks cheap. There he is from the back. And these pieces here, at least this one, I find falls out very easily. It does not have a firm grip in there. It's fallen out on me several times since I opened him up. But anyway, he's an okay little guy. Like I said, he's a repaint of a previous figure. I'd seen that little pterodactyl guy before, and even though I think little dinosaurs are neat, there was no way I was paying $10 for him. So at the very least, this isn't a repaint for me. This is the first time I'm getting this guy. And so yeah, he's not too bad, but not worth $10. And as far as transforming him, so like I said, he turns into an axe. You fold his legs up like that. You fold this piece down. Head goes around. And yeah, that's it. Now he's an axe. So he can fit right into Skywarp's hand. Like so. Now as for the little gun guys, so they're a little better. I feel like you get a little more value with these guys. Like, they actually have some pretty nice sculpting for such little figures. There's no articulation in the knees or the elbows or anything, but they have ball joints on the arms and legs, so you can actually still pose them around. Now these are just repaints of figures I already have as well, like this one here with the big peg on his chest. He's an exact repaint of the same two figures that I got with Hot Link. It's not my favorite design. That big peg is kind of awkward looking. So out of the two little gun guys, I prefer this guy. So to transform them, it's relatively easy. You flip that around, the arms go like so. So there you are. They basically look the same. So they're both turned into double-barreled guns. And so since I have the multiple blast effects, I could put yellow ones on this guy, blue ones on this guy, and there you go. Now Skywarp is armed to the teeth. So as for the Skywarp figure, I like this figure quite a bit. That's partly why I have bought it so many times in various colors. I don't think it's perfect, partly because as I mentioned before, I like these figures to look like their G1 counterparts. And the Seekers, their G1 counterparts turned into like F-15 jets or something. These figures here are based on the Seekers' Cybertronian modes. So before they ever came to Earth, they transformed into these kind of weird triangular spaceships called Tetrajets. So you can see here just by looking at the back of them, this is not the cockpit of like an F-15 or anything like that. It doesn't bother me too much because I don't transform them ever, but you can tell just from looking at the components that he doesn't transform into the jet that you're expecting of him. Now, I've complained about this mold on a couple other figures, like if I bring Starscream back in here, I find he looks a little incomplete. Like the inside of the wings here, they look like they could have used some more paint or some more sculpting or something. They look like unfinished model pieces. And so while all these figures share the same sculpt, I don't think it looks as bad on Skywarp and some of the other figures that are maybe darker colors, and it kind of hides the unfinished look of these a little bit. So Skywarp's a nice looking figure. He looks just like he's supposed to from his G1 cartoon days, as well as his G1 action figure. So you can see there he's got the mainly black with some gray throughout, purple kind of as the highlight, and the orange cockpit. So all the key components to Skywarp is there. I will say that it made it that much harder to spend $70 on this figure, considering I just got this figure of Hotlink a couple of weeks, a month or so beforehand. And Hotlink is a brand new character. He was not in the old cartoons or comic books or anything like that, and he's black and purple as well. So I almost feel like if they never made Skywarp, I could have almost just displayed this guy and said he was Skywarp on my shelf. He's just too similar. So to get Skywarp so soon afterwards, they're both black and purple. Like clearly you can see they are different. But if you're going to create a new character like this, I would have rathered him be something a little more unique so the two weren't so similar. Now, as far as articulation goes, these guys move well too. They've got a lot of good movement on the legs and everything. So you can get these guys in some pretty dynamic poses. Yeah, so they're good figures. I like them. Now, the head sculpts, I really like the head sculpt on these figures. They all share, there's two different head sculpts. There's one with a smirk and one without. Skywarp does not have a smirk, so he shares the same face as Starscream. He's a more serious dude. And all these figures, they have light piping. So you see that orange bit on the back of his head there. When you shine a light through that, it really kind of makes his red eyes glow, which is a pretty cool effect if you have them displayed with the right lighting. Otherwise, the eyes just kind of fade to black and you lose that cool detail. So here you see my Seeker army. I have bought this exact same figure 8 different times now in different color schemes. Some of them are more successful than others. So there was a part of me that really considered passing on Skywarp. I do have other versions of him in my collection, and for the price, I just felt like, am I really going to buy this thing again? But I knew I would have been kicking myself. He's, I think he's exclusive to certain stores. He's probably not going to be easy to come by, and if I didn't buy him when I saw him, I'd probably regret him, because I think this is probably going to be the last time that we get this mold, and my collection would have felt a little incomplete without him. In fact, they've already released an updated version of Skywarp, because now that they're done with the Siege line, Hasbro is now doing their Earthrise line, and the Seekers are now starting to appear in that new sculpt, which actually does transform into the F-15. So already Skywarp, Thundercracker, and Starscream have appeared in that new format. I doubt that we will get all these other characters, such as new guys like Hotlink and Redwing, in the new format. At least I'm hoping we don't, because I want to feel justified in sticking with these guys as my Seeker collection and not upgrading to the new Earthrise figures. Here is Iron Man 2020 inside the packaging. There's some cool artwork on the side.
and a picture of the figure on the back.
So here we have the Iron Man of 2020 outside of the packaging. And before I talk about this figure, I have a brief complaint about the price of him too. Most Marvel Legends, like up here in Canada, cost $29.99. And I buy most of them from EB Games, which is like a GameStop. And I have a like a membership card there, so I get a 10% discount on everything I buy. So I usually get them for $26.99 plus tax, which is great. But this guy here, I believe he's a Walgreens exclusive in the States, which means he's not going to show up at my Walmarts or anywhere else like that. But EB Games gets those Walgreens exclusives. So that was the only place I could get them. And all the stores were closed during COVID, so I had to order them from their website. And for whatever reason, my membership card didn't give me my discount when purchasing it on the website. And the shipping was pretty atrocious on this guy as well. So this guy, I think, ended up costing me $54 or something like that, which is pretty crazy. Because now that the stores are open again, chances are I'll walk in and I'll see him on the pegs for $26 and I'll be kicking myself. But at the same time, he might be one of those figures that if I didn't buy him when I had the chance, I would have missed out on him, because he did sell out on their website fairly quickly. I haven't seen any around yet, and I have been into a few different EB Games since they reopened. So for now, even though he was a little pricey, I'm glad I got him. So if you're not familiar with Iron Man 2020, he's exactly what his name implies. He is the Iron Man of 2020, which is kind of, might seem a little strange right now, because any Iron Man would be the Iron Man of 2020 right now. But when he was created back in the early 80s, I believe he first appeared in 1984, and he appeared as an enemy of Machine Man in a 4-issue miniseries. So yeah, he's kind of villainous is how he's often portrayed. He has fought, like I said, started Machine Man, then he fought Spider-Man, then he fought Death's Head. So yeah, he's usually portrayed as kind of a bad guy. He is related to Tony Stark, the Iron Man of the 80s. He's his like second cousin or something like that, and he had inherited Stark Enterprises in the far-flung future of 2020. So yeah, we finally caught up with this guy. I first encountered him in his second appearance when he appeared in an Amazing Spider-Man annual. And that annual came out, I think the first year I was collecting comic books, maybe the second, so like 86, 87. And I had a huge attachment to this character ever since, because I have a real fondness for any character I encountered in my early days of collecting comic books. And I collected Spider-Man, my brother collected Iron Man, so I always kind of felt like Iron Man was my brother Doug's character. He kind of had an ownership over him, so he never really felt like mine. But when Iron Man 2020 appeared in a Spider-Man book, he felt more like my character, so I kind of kept track of his appearances ever since. And I've always wanted a figure of him. We finally got one a couple of years ago in the 3 3/4 inch Marvel Universe line, which I do have somewhere. I just didn't feel like digging him out for this review. But now we finally got him in the 6-inch Marvel Legends style, and he's pretty great. So just as a quick comparison, let's bring in regular Iron Man, and you see kind of the similarities and the differences. So there's probably a lot of reused parts here. The boots, the legs, all that's the same. Like the kind of crotch piece here is probably all the same. The belt's a little different because this guy's got the big gears sculpted on the side as opposed to the discs. The chest piece is probably the same. It's probably got, yeah, let's see, there's a little, the regular repulsor is underneath there. So yeah, this piece here is a separate piece of plastic, this kind of brace he's wearing that's got his kind of signature big gears around his arm. And funny enough, I'm so used to seeing him with these gears, it seems like they've always been on him, but when I look back at the images of his early appearances, he didn't actually have those. So they kind of tacked those onto him at some point, like after his initial appearance or two. And sometimes they're drawn very exaggerated, and he's got big, huge, crazy gears, which don't make any sense. Doesn't look like he'd even be able to move his arms with those things. But anyway, I am glad they're here because they do kind of help distinguish him from regular Iron Man here. And these are a nice, like a manageable size. They don't hinder his movement in any way. They don't look absolutely ridiculous. I'm still not sure what point they serve necessarily, but they do look cool. So on his side there, I mentioned he's got a gear on this side. Here he's got, looks like some sort of throwing weapon maybe. Otherwise the arms I imagine are pretty much the same as Iron Man here as well. And then the head. The head is similar because it was based off the Iron Man design of the time, which was like this. But what's different is he's got these kind of sculpted teeth, and the eyes are slanted and a little, rather than just be kind of straight slits like this guy has. And this is partly because he was, like I said, often portrayed as a villain, so they've given him kind of an evil look with that kind of permanent scowl on his face. For all we know, Arno Stark, might be smiling and very happy underneath there, but the way the helmet is designed makes him look pissed off at all times. So yeah, if you have the Iron Man figure or any Marvel Legend, the articulation is what you'd expect. So he moves really well. He's got the double jointed knees, elbows, swivels at the boot, and I think at the glove. Well, not at the glove, but at the wrist and forearm there he moves. So yeah, moves really well. Looks really good. The paint job has kind of got a nice metallic sheen to it, so he's nice and shiny. And pretty cool. I like him. So there you go, Iron Man 2020. So here we have the leader inside of the packaging. There's some original artwork on the side where the leader is looking extra mischievous. And we see that same artwork on the back along with a little bio. And you see a picture here of all the other figures in the wave. None of which I have yet, but I might be picking up a couple others. Now here is the leader from the latest wave of Marvel Legends. I found this whole wave a couple of weeks ago when I went into my local comic book shop, Strange Adventures, to pick up the new 6-inch G.I. Joe figures that they had set aside for me. So I went in there expecting to get those, and then I saw that they had this full wave of Marvel Legends. And if I wasn't going in there to get G.I. Joes, I probably would have bought a few figures from this wave. I have no plans to get the entire wave because some of the figures are actually repeats of figures that I already have, such as Miss Marvel, and then the Captain America and the I think it's Iron Man are based on the video game versions, which I'm not really interested in. I already have plenty of Captain Americas and Iron Man. So I knew I wasn't going to complete the Build-A-Figure for this wave, which is Abomination. Again, I like Abomination as a character, but I already have another version of Abomination in my collection, so it wasn't necessary for me to chase down all these figures. So there was nobody in this wave that I absolutely had to have. I thought if I were to buy one figure, I was going to buy Mach 1, who is the Beetle, his other identity when he became a good guy. And he was a member of the Thunderbolts team. But when I saw that figure in hand, it didn't grab me. Like, the white parts of him looked a little too plasticky. I might still pick it up eventually. That's probably the next one I will get from this wave. If I get around to it, if I find them at Walmart or something at some point in the future. I might also consider picking up Captain Marvel. He's kind of cool. He feels like an important character in the Marvel Universe, but I honestly don't know a whole lot about him. He had died in the comic books before I ever started collecting comic books. So his legacy has always been important in Marvel comic books, but I don't know a whole lot about the character, so I felt I could pass on him. And Rage, he's another character. He's got kind of a unique look. He's a member of the New Warriors, which is a team I used to read the comic book and I really enjoyed. But Rage joined the team kind of late. I wasn't really reading the book when he was part of the team, so I felt I could pass on him too. So once I realized I wasn't going to buy Mach 1 as I expected, I was kind of surprised to find myself compelled to buy the leader. Because the leader, he's not a character that excites me very much. I've maybe read a comic or two with him in it. He is a Hulk villain. And even though it might be easy to assume he is an alien because of his green skin and bulbous head, he is actually a human being who, like the Hulk, was irradiated with gamma, and that kind of mutated him And yeah, this is the result. So I don't read a lot of Hulk comics, which is why I haven't read a lot of stories with the leader in it. I know his look changes a little bit here and there. I do have one other leader figure, and it's from the 3 3/4 Marvel Universe line. And you'll see here's my version of the leader there. And his head looks more like a brain coming right out of his head. You can kind of see the two lobes from it there, as opposed to like this one here, which is just kind of an elongated head. It kind of reminds me of Sinestro from the DC universe. So yeah, he's not a character I ever really felt compelled to get a figure of. However, during this whole COVID thing, and they stopped publishing new comic books, so I've had a shortage of things to read. So I went into my comic shop and I just tried to stock up on some graphic novels that have come out recently, things that I've heard good things about. And even though I've never really liked the Hulk that much, I've heard a lot of good things about the new series called The Immortal Hulk. And I started reading it, and even though the leader hasn't really appeared in the series yet, I read the first 6 volumes, which equates to the first like 30 issues or so of the series, and I got really hooked on it. I've never been a fan of the Hulk, and now I'm finding myself excited to read the next volume. And I know that the leader is going to appear soon because they kind of teased his appearance in one of the books. And so that kind of had me a little intrigued to check out this figure. And plus, when I saw it in hand, it's just really fun looking. Like, this outfit, the bright orange and the bright yellow, I don't know, the green head, he kind of reminds me of like a Dozer from Fraggle Rock or Bob the Builder or something. It's just a really brightly colored outfit. He looks like a comic book villain, and he just looks fun. So there's not a whole lot else I can say about him because I don't know much about the character, and I could have done a bunch of background research, but this video is long enough as it is already. So you can just see he's a nice looking figure. He moves well, just like any other Marvel legend. Double jointed knees, double jointed elbows. Good ab crunch there, gives him a good range of movement. So yeah, just a really fun figure. So I'm glad I picked him up. Now here is the Ghost and Lewis 2-pack. These characters appeared in the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie. And you'll see here, I got this at a very nice price. It's usually $60. I got it for $26. You get a shot of Lewis as played by Michael Pena on this side of the box. A shot of Ghost on this side. And on the back you get kind of a movie poster here, as well as a little bio for each character. So here we have Lewis and Ghost outside of the packaging. I do just want to quickly apologize for those of you that actually watch these videos all the way through. The sound quality on this video is probably jumping around quite a bit because as I experiment with my new desk, I'm moving the microphone. And also I realized for a couple of my reviews, like for Skywarp and for the leader, I have a fan going right beside me here because it's really warm in this room right now, and I forgot to turn it off when I was recording, so that's why you get that hum through some of those videos. So I apologize for all that. Hopefully the next couple of reviews will sound a little better. Anyway, so here we go, Lewis and Ghost. Now you can also see they've got some accessories there. So we've got this ant, which, there was plenty of ants in Ant-Man. So that makes sense that we get this guy. So that's a cool little accessory. Now also we've got this shot of, if you've seen Ant-Man and Wasp, you know that they carry the senior Ant-Man, Hank Pym's lab around. They shrink the building down and carry it around like a suitcase. And so that's what we've got here. We've got a shrunk down building. So even though that's pretty scene specific, it's kind of a neat little accessory to have. So let's talk about Lewis. This is based off of, Michael Pena is the actor that plays him, and I think this looks spot on. Like maybe when you get like super up close, this face printing technology is a little weird sometimes, but with just a little bit of distance, I think he looks great. You can immediately recognize him as Michael Pena, and it looks great. It's a nice looking figure. Now the only thing is, so this character of Lewis, even though he's one of the sources of comic relief in the Ant-Man movies, and I quite enjoy him. I've liked the actor for many years. I just recently finished watching Narcos that he was in, and it was fantastic. I don't think that character is based on any character in the comic book. I think he was created for the movie. I wouldn't swear by that. I'm not a regular Ant-Man reader. But regardless, even though he was fun and everything, he's just a guy. I don't really need an action figure of him. And that's why it's taken me so long to get this pack. Because this 2-pack has been around for quite some time. And I really wanted Ghost. But, where these figures are usually $30 a piece, you'd think if they sell 2 together, it would be like $50 at a bit of a discount. But this set, like when it originally came out, like I said, I think it was actually like $60-65, so maybe even more. So for a character that I really didn't want, I'm not going to pay more than I would even pay for him if he was packaged alone. And I kind of hoped that it would eventually go on sale. And sure enough, it has. I've seen it drop down to like $45. But still, I was thinking, would I pay $45 for Ghost by herself? Because really, that's what I'm doing. And not really, so I continued to wait. So yeah, to find it for $26 the other day, that was fantastic. So I finally jumped at it. And yeah, Ghost is a really nice figure. Now, if you're only familiar with Ghost from the movies, then you know about as much as I do of this Ghost, even though I've been reading comic books for several years, and I remember when Ghost first appeared. He first appeared in Iron Man back in the 80s. Yeah, that's right, the original Ghost in the comic books, and still is a man. So that Ghost, who is kind of like an industrialist saboteur, so he first appeared in Iron Man back in the, like I said, mid 80s or so. And yeah, he was a really cool character. Me and my brother both really liked him. To this day, he's my brother Doug's like one of his like probably top 2 or 3 favorite villains. Again, it's because he's one of these characters we encountered really early on when we were really impressionable and really getting in and excited about comic books. So all those early characters we encountered became fast favorites of ours. And Ghost was one of Doug's. And so Ghost, he had kind of a cool look to him with this kind of hood. And yeah, he had a couple of really cool storylines. In the last few years, they've kind of changed Ghost up. Now he's got this totally different costume. He always kind of hovers around, and he is a lot more like an actual ghost. He's portrayed as kind of stinky. He's this guy that doesn't bathe himself. There's always flies buzzing around him. So it doesn't even seem like the same character that we got in the 80s as he's portrayed nowadays in like the late 90s and into the 2000s. But I've liked both versions of them. And I really hope we get Marvel Legends of them, especially the original 80s look. We actually did get a figure of his creepy, dirty look, but that was an exclusive at a Comic-Con, I think San Diego, a couple of years back, and you could only get him in a box set. So yeah, he's very hard to get. So this is the only Marvel Legend Ghost that's readily available. So it's kind of unfortunate if you're a Ghost fan that you don't get a figure of, one of those 2 more well-established and beloved looks. But this is a really cool look on its own, and I really liked the character in the movie. She didn't have a whole lot to do, but she was cool, and I'd like to see more of her in another movie. And I'm actually pretty surprised they haven't taken that character and kind of introduced a female Ghost into the Marvel Universe yet, but I'm going to guess that's probably coming one day. So yeah, as far as design goes, she's got some of the design elements that she borrows from the original look, specifically this hood, the white outfit, the kind of multiple eyes looking thing there. That is taken from the kind of the secondary Ghost look, which is a little creepier. So yeah, it's got design elements from both versions, which I like. Articulation wise, so she's a little different than the other Marvel Legends I had previously showed you. She's only got single jointed elbows. Like even Lewis here, who doesn't probably need to do much action stuff, he's got double jointed elbows there, you see. It seems to happen a lot with female characters. I don't know if it's because maybe their limbs are a little thinner and it would make them a little more fragile to have those extra joints. She does have the double jointed knee though, so that's good. So yeah, she moves well, she's sculpted well. Paint apps are minimal, but she looks really good. Like it's not just stark white. You can see there's kind of different shades of off-white, so it gives her a little bit of definition. You can see the details in there. And then the coolest accessory that she comes with is a secondary head. So you can pop this head off, and just for realism's sake, it comes with this extra little piece, so it can look like she's taken her hood off and just kind of tucked that down. And then we got this second hood head on here, which we can plop on there. And I don't know this actress's name. I'm not familiar with her, but just like with Michael Pena here, this is a really good likeness. It looks really good. So again, they're using that kind of face scanning technology, so it's rather than just somebody painting her face, it's kind of like digitally printed on there, which is partly why it looks so good. But yeah, I like both head sculpts. I'll probably display her with the hooded head, but yeah, this one's pretty cool, and I really like this figure, so I'm glad I finally picked her up. Now, speaking of extra heads, so there's a lot of characters that come with alternate heads, and I've got a whole bag full of them. So, for example, a couple of years ago, I got this Chameleon figure. And Chameleon, he's a Spider-Man villain. He can change his identity. And so he came with a couple extra heads. He came with Hammerhead, which is kind of this flat-topped gangster that often fights Spider-Man, as well as Jonah Jameson, Spider-Man's boss at the Daily Bugle. So I assume these were included with Chameleon so that you could have Chameleon, take on the identity of Jameson and impersonate him as he has done in the past. But also, because this body is just kind of a plain suit, you take the gun out of his hand and you put the J. Jonah Jameson head on him, and there's no reason that couldn't just be a genuine J. Jonah Jameson figure, or a Hammerhead if you prefer. Now, of those three characters, Chameleon seemed the most important to me, so that's how I've chosen to display him. But since Lewis isn't that important to me, I'm hoping that those heads fit on this body, and I can either have a Jonah Jameson or a Hammerhead permanently in my collection from now on. So let's take a look. So here we have J. Jonah Jameson, and he looks pretty good. I was a little worried because Michael Pena is like Latino that the skin wouldn't match up, but you can see there the face and the neck, they're not perfect, but it's not noticeable. So yeah, that definitely works, but let's try Hammerhead. So Hammerhead's head fits on there just as well, but I don't think it suits him. He's kind of an old school gangster, kind of a Dick Tracy villain type of guy, that this suit with the tan pants and the blue jacket just doesn't really work for him. Plus, I think Hammerhead is intended to be kind of more of a stockier guy, so this doesn't really work for me. So that's kind of a shame, because where he's a villain, I probably would have preferred to have a Hammerhead on my shelf, but I think I'm going to use this body permanently as J. Jonah Jameson, because Jonah is much more important to the Marvel Universe than old Lewis here. So there we go. That makes this package a little more worth my while. So yeah, there you go. Here we have Bebop and Rocksteady from NECA's animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle line inside of the packaging. So there's some nice artwork on the front that shows these characters from the animated series. On this side, you have an image of the Bebop figure. On this side, you have an image of the Rocksteady figure. And on the back, you have a shot of both figures together, along with kind of a generic little backstory of the Ninja Turtles. It's not specific to these two characters. And then you also see a cross promotion for the other figures available in this Wave 2. So here is Bebop and Rocksteady outside of the packaging. Now, I was really excited about these figures. When they first revealed these figures, I think it was probably at Toy Fair, more than a year ago. I had pre-ordered these things right away, and I've been waiting and waiting and waiting. They were supposed to ship in 2019, and I thought for sure if I got these figures in 2019, Bebop was going to be my toy of the year, because I thought it looked so great. I was so excited about it. And it still took months and months after that, and I finally got them here a couple of weeks ago. And they are pretty great. I'm excited. Bebop was always my favorite character from the whole Ninja Turtles world. Like, Leonardo's my favorite turtle, but if I could only have one Ninja Turtle toy, it would be Bebop. The problem is, the toys have never really lived up to my expectations. I had the vintage Bebop when I was a kid. I no longer have it. But I didn't really like that figure. I thought it was kind of ugly looking. The way he had this like pink face that didn't match his brown body. It didn't really do it for me. I've got a few figure since. A few of them I've skipped on. Like for the newer cartoon, the Bebop. Not only did he look weird, he's very skinny, wearing like an all black cat suit. It's just the figure itself seemed kind of cheap. Like it had very few paint applications. I just wasn't impressed with it. And then when these guys appeared in the second live action Turtle movie, I thought I might get the figures based on that, but they gave Bebop a big beer belly, and I just didn't really like the look of him there. So he's a character I really like, but the toys have never really lived up to my expectations. I do have some here that I'll bring up to compare, but before I bring up the other figures, I just want to quickly talk about all the accessories these guys came with, and then I'll move them out of the way. You can see each guy came with 4 alternate hands. So I've got both of them with their fisted hands, which is how they came in the packaging. But they've got hands that have like trigger fingers for holding guns. And then they've got these kind of more open, grabby hands. So each guy has those. They came with one little turtle communicator here. And you can see on there, there's Shredder's face. So one of them can be holding that, taking orders from Shredder somewhere. And then we've got 2 of these little handguns. And 2 of these rifles. So that's pretty cool. They've got lots of accessories. I'll talk more about those in a moment. So here you see some Bebop and Rocksteady figures from a couple years ago. And these are the ones that have been displayed on my shelf kind of as my default versions of these characters. These were part of a line called Ninja Turtles Classics, I believe. And the Turtles looked really nice in that line. But these guys just didn't. I thought they were okay. Again, I don't even care that much about Rocksteady. Bebop is the guy that concerns me the most. And yeah, just the way his head is so big and it just looks oversized for his body. He's got this massive hunch. Like, he's got the classic costume there, but he just doesn't quite have the classic look. I like my Bebop to look cool. I don't like him to look gross. I know warthogs are kind of gross in nature, but I never thought Bebop, the way he was drawn in the old comic books and the way he looked in the old cartoon, I didn't think he was gross, but it seems like a lot of portrayals of him since kind of make him that way. So yeah, this guy here is kind of grotesque, and I didn't really care for it. The Rocksteady's okay. He's still kind of an ugly looking guy for a rhino. One thing that's nice about this guy is he's got his helmet that's removable. The newer version does not have a helmet at all. But yeah, so he's okay. But I'm glad that I can replace these figures with these new ones from Neca. Now let's bring out a couple of other Neca figures here that I've gotten recently. I've been very impressed with Neca's animated turtle line. So you see here's Shredder. And so I think the scale's about right there. Because these guys were humans. They grew to be larger because they were merged with big scary animals. So the fact that they're a little taller and quite a bit beefier than Shredder makes sense, but they look really good together. And then if I bring in Leonardo here, you see that they stand quite a bit taller than the Turtles, and they all look really good together. So this is a really nice looking collection. Now the sculpting on both of these guys and the paint jobs I think are top notch. Like the painting, it kind of looks kind of cell shaded, like that Megatron we looked at earlier. Like it looks like it's a cartoon come to life, and I think it works really well. So yeah, you can see here just a lot of great elements to this figure. Rocksteady as well. Looks just like he did on the cartoon. I think he's great. Little turtle shells there. So yeah, really cool. My favorite element of Bebop, so the head sculpt, you see here, at least in my mind, he doesn't look grotesque anymore. His head looks to scale with the rest of his body. He looks cool. But I really like how his glasses, they're attached to his head permanently, but you can flip them up. And you can see he's got these black eyes with little white pupils. And you see those little white pupils kind of glaring at you ever so slightly through the shades there. And I think that's really cool. And another really neat feature is that both these guys have mouths that open. It's not a lot, but it's enough. Yeah, I think it probably opens more than that, but that's about as much as I want to force it right now. And same with Rocksteady. So close that up or open it, see his tongue there. So that's kind of cool. But here's my complaint about both these figures, and what will probably keep Bebop from topping my Toy of the Year list. They feel breakable. And I didn't feel that way about the other figures in this line when I get the Turtles. But these guys here, like moving that jaw on these guys, I'm really worried. I can't tell when the tension stops. I feel like it's just going to snap off. Moving their arms is really scary. Like, I don't know how posable these guys are. Like, does his arm come right out to the side? I don't know, because I feel it's just going to break. And Neca does have a reputation of having some pretty breakable figures. I remember Neca made the figures for the first Pacific Rim movie, and my nephews bought a bunch of the Jaegers, and as soon as they would take them out of the packaging, their arms would snap off and stuff, and they were really disappointed. So I think Neca is made more as for the collector market, and when they try and make stuff for kids, it's probably not a good idea. So I'm a little worried about him. Rocksteady, right out of the packaging, this arm kind of separated when I went to turn it. It looks like that's, I hope it would just fall off and I could snap it back into place, but I'm almost worried that it's actually on the brink of breaking already. So I'm really leery about posing him or moving this arm or trying to bend like this double jointed elbow. So I'm kind of just keeping them in place, which is kind of a bummer. His ankles are really thin and they're kind of loose, so I have a hard time getting him to stay up, because he's pretty top heavy. Another problem is these hands. So they gave them extra hands to hold the guns. But I found trying to get the guns into these hands, like these are so rigid. I'm like, when you have a Marvel Legend, there's some soft plastic and kind of bend the fingers a little bit. But with these guys, I feel if I try and get that gun, those fingers around the thing, either the gun or the fingers are going to break off. Like, there's just no give to this whatsoever. It's like clay, like hardened clay. So, yeah, like for this handle of this gun to go in there, even best case scenario, even if I can force it in there, it's going to scrape the paint either off of the gun or off of the hand. So all those extra hands don't really do me much good, but I'm too scared to switch them out. Because God forbid if I pulled this hand out and that peg were to snap, then I'd be really pissed. So I'm probably just going to leave these guys as is. They're nice display pieces. Let's see there with Rocksteady. He's got his knife there. I don't think this comes out of the sheath. It would make sense that it would, but I'm scared to touch it. Even there, you see the glue. I think that's supposed to be permanently in place, but just from me trying to pull the knife out, that's come detached. These guys just feel really delicate. So that's kind of a bummer, but they look great. So still the best looking Bebop I think ever produced. Here is the Evil Ninja Turtle Slash. This is from Neca. And you see here, this one is based on his appearance in the video game Turtles in Time. So there's some weird graphics going on the side of the packaging. I'm not really sure what's up with these Ninja Turtles exactly. And those look like they might be screen grabs from the video game. It's been decades since I've played it. On the back of the packaging, you get a nice shot of the Slash action figure, as well as the other figures in this wave, which are also based on the video game. So this is the Evil Ninja Turtle Slash. So Slash had a couple of different looks to him. In the cartoon, he kind of had one big robotic eye. He was kind of goofy looking. I didn't really like the way he looked in the cartoon. But because all these other NECA figures I've been showing you are based off of the cartoon, they are going to be releasing a cartoon-inspired version of Slash. So that figure is coming out in a 2-pack with Leatherhead very soon. And I'll probably still pick that one up, mostly because I want the Leatherhead. Now, Slash, the other look he had was from the vintage toy. So if you look at the vintage toy from the 80s, it did not resemble the way he looked in the cartoon, which was kind of odd because most of the toys corresponded fairly well with the cartoon, but Slash looks pretty different. And I liked that one too. I liked that look more. Like it was a little kind of, I don't know, he looks a little maniacal and monstrous. So yeah, that was kind of a cool look. And then there's another look from the way he appeared in the video games and the arcade games at the time. So this figure is based off of his appearance from Turtles in Time. So that's why it's subtle, but he's got some kind of 8-bit. This is supposed to be kind of digitized. So you see he's got this blocky paint job on his legs, these full squares. So he's supposed to look pixelated. Now, I don't think it stands out that much, and I'm glad because I wouldn't want this guy to be a straight-up 8-bit figure. Like, they've released some 8-bit toys in the past where they're really just blocky. They kind of look like something out of Minecraft or something, and it's not really my scene. But this paint job, it's very subtle. I wouldn't even necessarily know that it was based off of the arcade look. But I think of the 3 different looks, if you were going to take either the cartoon, the video game, or the vintage toy and create a cool new figure, I'm glad they went with the arcade one for this one because it's a really cool look. I think Slash looks awesome in this design. So for accessories, he doesn't have a whole lot. He's got this jagged sword, which looks really nice, and it fits into his hand pretty well. And he also has this one little grenade, which clips onto his belt, but it falls off constantly. Every time I pick this figure up, this thing goes rolling across the floor, so that'll probably end up in my spare parts bin pretty quickly. So yeah, really cool figure. I like it a lot, except I've got the same gripe as I had with Bebop and Rocksteady. I'm scared to pose this figure because he feels very stiff. Like, look at this arm here. You can see that joint. So that implies I should be able to bend his arm forward, but there's so much tension when I do that, and I don't even see, it almost looks like it's not intended to move. And with a lot of these designer, well, not so much designer toys, but these things aren't regular retail. These things aren't necessarily marketed towards kids. It's recommended with a lot of these figures, you either heat them up with a hairdryer or run them under some warm water before you pose them. So that's probably what I should do with both him and Bebop and Rocksteady. But yeah, it's not like I'm going to be playing with these guys anyway, so I might not even bother doing that. I might just take them, put them on my shelf as is, and be content with them. But yeah, this guy looks pretty good. I'm just noticing he's got something on his head here. I think that might be, yeah, that's probably on my end. It looks like it's some stick tack. So I can get that goop off of his head there. So yeah, the paint job's nice. The sculpt is really nice. Like, I really love this crazy look on his face. He looks awesome. Oh, there goes that grenade again. But yeah, it's just a kind of a bummer about the articulation and kind of how this guy feels. He feels, I think he's a good, solid, heavy figure, but at the same time, his joints feel very delicate. And but yeah, otherwise, really cool looking. Now here is Obsidian Fury from Diamond Select's Pacific Rim Uprising line inside the package. On the back, we get a nice shot of the figure, as well as a little bio for the character, and a little bit of a cross promotion with some of the other figures that are available. And that's about it. So let's pop this guy open and take a look at him outside of the packaging. So here is Obsidian Fury. Now this figure, unlike everything else I've been showing you, is not very new. Most of that other stuff is just stuff that has just come out for release. This guy here, however, came out, probably more than a year ago, a year and a half ago maybe, because he's based on the second Pacific Rim movie, Pacific Rim Uprising. I can't remember off the top of my head when that movie came out. But 2 different toy companies had the rights to make figures to that. So there was Diamond Select Toys, which made this figure here, and also Bandai. So I wanted to collect the figures, but I wasn't sure which one to buy. I had watched some videos on YouTube myself to kind of help me make up my mind, and I had gone with the Bandai figures. So here is my Obsidian Fury from Bandai. Now, it is quite a bit shorter. Some of the other ways it differs, like the paint jobs look pretty different. Like, this guy is very clean and polished. Like, he looks like he's brand spanking new, and he looks plasticky. Like it kind of looks like a toy, which doesn't necessarily bother me, but you can see here, like he moves really well. So he's very poseable, like how easily his joints flow. You can get him to do the splits and do kind of crazy stuff. I like him a lot. But he's really lacking in paint apps. Like he basically has none. Whoops. So other than like he's black and he's silver, that's kind of his base color. And then he's got some orange there in his faceplate. But that's it. And I thought this figure was great. This figure, I can't remember if I put it on the top of my list or it was definitely in like my top 2 or 3 that year when I made my best of the year list. I was like totally in love with this figure. And I thought all of them were great. Like this was my favorite Jaeger in the movie. But I ended up getting the other ones from the line too, and they were all really nice. This one being my favorite. And however, I wanted all the characters from Pacific Rim Uprising. So Bandai made most of the Jaegers, but then there was a couple they didn't make, and only Diamond Select made them. The most notable one that I wanted was the Kaiju Drone. So this is the Jaeger that kind of turns into a kaiju. So I totally would have bought one of these if Bandai made one, but they didn't. So I was forced to get this Diamond Select version. And when I got this guy, I couldn't buy him anywhere online, just the one figure. And honestly, this is the only one I was going to buy. I was going to skip on the other 2 characters I didn't have, which were Valor Omega and November Ajax, because those characters were barely featured in the movie, so I didn't really feel I needed them. However, in order to get this Kaiju Drone figure, I had to buy the set of the 3 of them together. And when I got those 3 figures together, I was actually really impressed with them. So I didn't expect to like the Diamond Select toys as much, but they're actually really nice. And Valor Omega ended up being a real favorite of mine too. And he made my best of the year list in 2019. I thought he was great. So knowing that the Diamond Select figures were pretty nice, I went into a comic shop here, a local comic shop called Monsters Comic Lounge the other day. And I was looking to just spend a little bit of money, maybe support them now that they were open again after the whole COVID thing. And I was looking around for something to buy, and I saw they had this guy, the Diamond Select version of Obsidian Fury. And I thought, well, I really don't need him. I already have the Bandai version. But I thought, you know what? Just looking at him again, he's so cool, and I was so excited to get this figure. I was like, I just want to be able to buy this character and open him up all over again and enjoy him a second time around. So that's what I did. So I bought him again, and this guy, it's pretty cool in its own right. Like, not only is it a lot taller, but you can see here he's got a lot more paint apps. All this kind of orange little spots throughout him, all along his spine. He's got a lot of those little orange spots. His hands, he's got these little silver fingernails, which is pretty cool. And just the overall look, like here, like this metal look, like it looks like weathered metal, like he's been through some stuff here. It doesn't look like the super clean plastic that the other one does. So this one definitely has its own pros. One of the things that's kind of a bummer about this figure is these chainsaws on his forearms. These are permanently like withdrawn like that. There's nothing you can do about that. They're not removable. And whereas this guy, you can pop these off and you can just take the forearm off of the blade and plug that back in directly, so you can have the option to have him with or without the like retractable plasma chainsaws. So it's kind of a bummer you don't have the option here. Another thing that kind of sucks, that if you're going to give him the permanent chainsaws, you might as well have painted them orange, because that's, kind of the coolest thing he does in the movie is when both of these chainsaws come out and he's kind of goes like full Darth Maul with these double blades all lit up. So I don't know why they didn't paint them orange. But that aside, I think this is a really cool figure. He doesn't move nearly as well as that one, but he still moves pretty good. Oh, I just popped his shoulder pad off there trying to move him. But, yeah, pretty good range of movement there. So anyway, I'm really stoked about this guy. I know everybody's... Oops, there you go, just lost shoulder pad. I really love Pacific Rim Uprising. people seem to hate it. And even the longer that it's been out, people seem to hate it more and more. Every time if I search Pacific Rim Uprising on YouTube, all I find is videos that say, what went wrong with Pacific Rim Uprising? You know, everything that sucks about Pacific Rim Uprising. Like, it definitely wasn't perfect, but I thought it was a hell of a lot of fun. And I really liked these new characters they introduced, like Obsidian Fury and the Kaiju Drone. So yeah, I'm pretty stoked to get this figure here. Now this is the Kaiju Drone from Diamond Select's Pacific Rim Uprising line. And he is inside the packaging, but just barely. You'll see that I actually got this figure at a nice discount of $10 because this packaging is mangled. It's basically fallen apart. There you go. He's half open already. So why don't we take a look at this guy outside of the packaging. So like I said, I got this guy a while back because I wanted to complete at least my collection of all the kaijus. I wasn't as concerned about getting all the Jaegers, but this guy's kind of a cross between the two, and so I wanted to pick him up, and that's what prompted me to buy Diamond Select figures in the first place. So I got this guy a while back, and yeah, he's pretty cool. Like, his movement is a little limited, but I got him mostly for the look of him. Here, I'm having a little trouble getting him on camera. These Diamond Select figures are a lot bigger than the Bandai ones, so they are a lot to kind of deal with here on camera. It doesn't seem like his head moves really at all. He's got some movement in the shoulder, bends at the elbow. His hands are articulated, and he actually came with an alternate set of hands. They're not much different though, so I don't know why you'd really change them out. A little bit of movement, mid waist. Like, to be honest, he's fairly stiff. He's hard to pose very much. Like the Diamond Select figures, I'm a little worried. Or sorry, like the Neca figures, I'm a little worried that if I move him too much, he could break. But he does look cool just as a display piece. So usually I use these videos to show you my new stuff. So you might be wondering, why am I showing you this guy if I had him for a while? Well, as I showed you there in the packaging, just last week, my comic shop that I usually buy all my comic books with, Strange Adventures, they had posted some toys on Instagram that they said they had up for sale, and they had a picture of this guy. So even though I've already had one of these figures for months, I thought, well, if they're on sale, I might as well ask them how much it's going for, because the Kaiju drones, if you saw the movie, there were like hundreds of them. Because what it was is the humans created this drone army to help protect them from kaijus, but little did they know somebody had planted a virus in there, and all the drones turned into kaijus. So yeah, there was a ton of them in the movie. So I thought, well, you know, for the right price, maybe I'll just get a second one, and I can kind of army build them. And when he told me only $10, I thought that was a great deal. So yeah, I ran in and got it. I didn't realize at the time that the packaging was so destroyed, but that doesn't really bother me because I open up all my stuff anyway. So even though I've had this Kaiju drone for a while, I now have a second one. So he's new and old at the same time. So now I have this nice little squad of Kaiju drones. So when I put these guys back up on display, I can have two of them reaching towards my Gypsy Avenger or whatever. So yeah, pretty cool figure, and I don't mind having two. And for $10, I would buy these guys all day long. So those are my latest toy purchases. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button below, subscribe to my channel, and yeah, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'm happy to chat with you. So I'll be back with another episode soon. Until then, though, thank you very much for watching. See ya.